Hey Kathy, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Lockdown, this COVID-19, gorgeous weather outside, can't get out.
I know. So this is a great opportunity to
Yeah,
talk about
yeah, being productive.
transformation.
Yeah, this is the live example of digital transformation, correct? So please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and help us getting to know more.
Okay. I'm Cathy Smith. I'm a global digital transformation consultant, and most of my experience has been related to the banking industry. So I've worked on several digital transformation projects, for financial institutions. Um, from my experience, most of the projects have been related to creating efficiencies,
Right,
reducing costs, digitizing every aspect of the business to once again satisfy the digital customer. So the focus has been on staying competitive
mm-hmm.
and trying to ward off the disruptors. That's
Right,
really the focus. And also the focus has been on digitizing not only operations, but also digitizing your deliveries to your customers, how you engage with your customers, digitizing statements, billings, getting away from paper, changing to a paperless, environment. But with the recent pandemic, COVID-19
yep,
pandemic, organizations are finding themselves propelled into digital transformation on
right.
steroids, okay?
That's
They are
correct. I
not
like that.
prepared. They have found this has been a rude awakening for a lot of companies
Right,
because they've been, going through the process of digitizing their workplaces, their
right,
products, in a somewhat steady, somewhat slow pace.
right.
But now, with everyone having to work remotely
Yep,
and operations have actually changed. So organizations are looking for solutions to allow their teams to work remotely. Up until now, teams haven't worked remotely. A lot of teams haven't. They've just been, on site. So now the shift is to move that functionality to a remote, a
right,
virtual environment. And so they're looking for, solutions to help them do that. In the past, they may have used a Microsoft project, okay, which is basically allow them to use that solution within the office,
right,
along with, you know, like Cisco WebEx.
right.
But using those two platforms doesn't allow you to work remotely until now,
Yes,
until organizations are looking for solutions that will allow them to use the video conferencing within one platform without having to go from one platform to another, but within one platform, and to connect virtually for dispersed geographical teams. And so
right.
that's really the push now, is to build capacities in a virtual environment.
Right. And just to elaborate, because it's not the technical issue, it's also the cultural issue. People are not used to it, right? So it's another thing, people, those who are not used to it, and plus there are some technical gaps and all that stuff related to it. But as you said, it's on steroids, and people have to do it. There's no option. And especially, let's say, especially when you're coming from the banking industry and banking background, I know there are a lot of compliance and regulatory. We'll go into that later. But again, so irrespective of those data security and privacy, but what are other challenges? Because they cannot just flip the switch to go and enable everyone working remotely. What do you want to say about that?
Well, adoption has always been an issue.
Right.
Okay, before COVID-19, adoption of new technologies has always been a challenge for organizations. Right. Technology isn't the end all. Mm-hmm. Okay, for digital transformation. Digital transformation is a comprehensive approach to change. Okay, and included in that is the culture, the people. Right. So unless you address the people factor, it's going to be really challenging for your organization to change into a digital business model. So that's why it's very important that leadership spearheads this initiative from the very beginning, so that resources are allocated. You have the organization on a whole embracing, getting buy-in to this new way of operating, of being. Okay. Right. So unless you focus on, the culture, it's going to be very challenging.
Right. And yeah, that's no question about it. It's more of a cultural. And then if you, instead of technology driving business, if you show the value, how it can improve the way people work, and show them the value, they become more productive, save them time, make their life and job easy. So they will adopt. There has to be a process for that. So that's one of the area, right? And also.
And the process is change management. Okay.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. Change management. Yep. Because tell me about it. Yep.
A lot of leaders, they believe that technology will, fix everything, but technology alone will not fix everything.
Absolutely agree.
So a component of the overall digital transformation should involve change management, okay, which has an adoption piece, a training piece, a communication piece, okay. So unless, once again, going back to the people factor, unless you address how your organization, how your business units are going to transform, how are you going to communicate, how are you going to change the processes, how are you going to set up policies and procedures, unless all of that is thought through and planned for, once again, it's going to be a challenge.
So we live in this fast world, right? So technology and the platform, I'm using it, different people, different using it. I know this is a great value. And again, people, when they are not ready to have a transformation to become a part of the digital transformation. So we give them the tool, we give them one application like the one we are using for file access, real-time collaboration, video calls and all that. So now it's changed. Traditionally, if you go 10 years ago, we didn't have that infrastructure. We didn't have cloud. We didn't have any super fast computers, and even the cell phone, I could have the same video call quality even on my cell phone. Things have changed. Software has been developing so fast.
Yes.
There are so many capabilities in the cloud. It's like 100-degree change if you compare with pretty much 8-10 years ago. It's so fast, and especially in COVID-19, as you said. Now even it's more of an urgent. People have no choice. So let's talk about how this has changed the software then, and those best practices.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much, even beyond technology,
Right.
Okay. We know technology changes very rapidly,
Right.
quickly. Okay.
Right.
Technology changes as fast as you can send a text message.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We know
Right.
that.
Right.
Okay. But for example, project management,
Mm-hmm.
methodology of project management, which is the Project Management Book of Knowledge, the PMBOK methodology.
Pinball. Yep, I do know. I
A
know.
lot of organizations have used that. That has been the traditional
Mm-hmm.
way of approaching projects.
Okay.
Okay. Given the speed of change, organizations have found that the PMBOK methodology, even though it has been effective in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the model doesn't align with the fast, moving request that organizations have to operate at this point in terms of the
Right.
project.
Right.
So the methodologies have changed. So
Mm-hmm.
organizations have moved from traditional PMBOK to agile SCRUM methodologies, okay, where you form small teams and the teams are together for a short period of time, maybe 2 to 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and they focus on a particular product delivery. And at the end of that, 2 to 6 weeks, the deliverables are completed.
Mm-hmm.
And so organizations are, in alignment now with that methodology versus the more slower methodology of the PMBOK. So I see that a lot. I see that organizations are really moving into that area. Where the challenge comes is there are still organizations without a project management office,
PMO office. Yep.
a PMO.
Yep.
Okay. So without a PMO, there lacks an infrastructure to handle the enterprise change. Okay. So organizations some of them are starting up their PMOs. I've
Mm-hmm.
had the experience of starting a PMO myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates the infrastructure so that change can take place, because you need structure, you need organization, you need some, way, some approach to making sure that projects are identified within scope. They have a
Right.
timeline. You
Right.
have certain tools and methods that you use to get things done. And so, project management offices, enterprise PMOs are very important for organizations.
So yeah, so let's talk a little bit more on that, because enterprise world, we have seen this is a common practice for PMO, and people who are not, they are establishing it. So the question is, okay, we know enterprise banks and all that. So what do you think, is it going to help with the PMO office or those practices to smaller organization or not, or should they be looking for some third party? Are there anything? I know the large company has the large projects, it's a huge business impact, and you have to do all those stuff. But what about different companies? They are not into it, or do you think there a value for them or no?
Okay, so for the large organizations, okay, some of them are using management consulting firms,
Okay,
okay,
right.
to come in and set up the
Mm-hmm.
PMO,
Right.
because they don't have a reference point, okay?
Right.
So I see that as a trend, okay, for the larger organizations. For the mid-sized organizations, they're also using management consulting firms, but smaller outfits.
Okay.
And then you have the smaller organizations that may not have the the wherewithal for a management consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
So there are management consulting firms that will set up a small PMO within your small organization.
Nice.
So there is something for everyone.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. And then if you're too small, you can hire, a consultant that will help you structure that function.
Or they can hire you.
I've done it before.
Yes.
So, so I see that as a trend. Then you also have implementation partners.
Right.
Okay, for technology solutions.
Right.
Okay, so organizations may not have a team within the company that can implement or deploy a cloud-based solution.
Right.
So, they will hire an implementation partner to help through that life cycle. So that's also a trend.
No, that's exactly. That absolutely makes sense. Also, I want to talk a little bit, touch base. The piece I wanted to attach or to this discussion is now, since everybody is rushed to the cloud, so people have access to the corporate data through unmanaged devices, their laptop, their mobile. So I know you've been talking about some cloud security, so why don't you cover or talk about from that angle, and from the leadership point of view, governance, security, especially you have a background in banking, and also, walk us through that.
Well, when you are considering a cloud solution, it's very important to go through the due diligence of looking at your IT vendor. Okay. So I have found that companies are requiring vendors to provide evidence of a cybersecurity insurance policy. Okay. If you lack that evidence, you have to come up with some way of proving how data is going to be protected, how the company would address a data breach. Okay, so I'm finding that is that's prominent.
Yeah, I mean,
before the deployment is rolled out,
they
have to go through a due diligence. That's crucial, because I don't think that a lot of organizations are aware that that's a necessity to have, to make sure up front that the company has proven to you some evidence of how they will deal with that type of incident.
So it reminds me, okay, so I end up paying to Geico for my insurance for the cloud security. Because it's like buying a car. You got to have insurance to be on the road. Same thing before you go to the cloud. It's the same concept.
Yes. So that's only one piece of it. Okay. So once you go through the due diligence, you have your legal department to review that, see whether or not it's approved. Then you go to the next step, and that is to make sure that you engage your security team.
Right.
Okay. So your security team can make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and make sure that those who have are given access, okay, make sure that they are identified, and make sure that that's monitored. So you want to make sure that you have an identity access management type of system.
I see. That's my favorite topic.
Okay. that's a hot topic
Access
these days.
management. Yep, exactly. Need to protect
Because you
because
have to
that's the one.
manage.
If your
You need.
identity is breached, your identity is hacked, you're gone in the cloud. And there are best practices. Maybe sometime we'll put and go through that. What are those criteria protecting the digital identities and best practices? Uh, so, so why don't you tell us about like a governance piece of it, right? Especially, it is big itself, like governance and data residency.
Oh, governance is very important. That is a part of the digital transformation. You
Okay,
will need some type of governance in place to make sure that the change is monitored, and if there are changes going forward, that that is also monitored. That business units aren't able to just make changes,
exactly.
haphazardly.
Right,
So there needs to be some form of committee in place or team in place that will review the changes, approve the changes, and monitor the implementation. So
right,
governance is a big piece, especially in the banking industry, because it's a highly regulated, industry,
right,
and they therefore need to comply with regulations. So a lot
right,
of institutions, financial institutions are doing is also driven by the regulations,
right. No, I
because
actually totally get that because you mentioned a good point for the banking because they are traditionally and natively or organically they have the system, so they need to have a governance in place. Maybe call it governance, cloud governance, or whichever. And as you mentioned before, they put these things in the cloud. They gotta have a very good understanding of the holistic picture of the governance model, where the data is for what's related to and the policies around that, and then monitor it basically and stick to this and follow the best practices and guideline. And this is how they can achieve the security of the data, right?
right, absolutely, absolutely. Because without that, then the organization is at risk.
Yeah, and risk is
You,
high.
yeah,
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 because you go
yeah.
ahead.
Even now, even with the virtual environments that
Yeah,
organizations are creating to manage the remote workforces,
right,
security is an issue,
right.
you know,
Yep.
and definitely want to make sure that um, that is taken care of. Well, I just want to emphasize the importance of security. And I believe that it's important to engage the security professionals, whether internal or external, very early on
Mm,
in your digital transformation program,
okay.
so that you will be able to mitigate risk, and
Hmm.
you will embed the risk mitigation very early on, and
Right.
versus responding to an incident that has occurred
Hmm.
due to the fact that measures weren't taken into consideration,
Right.
from the very beginning. So I
Right.
find that's very helpful to, you know, have a security risk management mindset
Right.
from the very beginning and also throughout, because
Right.
there are going to be changes, and with those changes risks tend to pop up.
Yeah, and I've experienced this is firsthand. The early either you get involved as a security expert or you bring other security and risk expert in the project, literally it can help you a lot. Other than that, you're 60% of the project and you figure out now we involve the security and then it's like a not waste of time but energy and everything.
Right, and even now with the remote workforce,
Yep.
you will find that organizations are vulnerable
Yeah,
to,
absolutely.
external threats. And so now more than ever does the security measure need to be addressed.
Right.
Because, it can be a free-for-all.
Yeah.
And I also feel that it's really important to go through the due diligence with all your partners.
Yeah.
Your technology partners,
Right.
to make sure that they're not selling data, make sure that they have security measures in place.
Yep.
That's really important.
So I thank you, and then hopefully we'll have more conversation around that, because there are so many additional topics within this conversation we had. We can talk about security, risk, identity, and different episodes we can work and learn from the other side of the IT. So I thank you again, and
You're welcome.
we'll see you again.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.